Hi, welcome to Glenohumeral Gurus, a podcast for clinicians with an interest in shoulder pathology. I'm your host, Margie Olds, and it's a pleasure for me to bring you these podcasts. The aim for the podcast is to deliver some clinically relevant content for you. I plan to interview people from all over the globe and talk to clinicians and researchers and anybody with an interest in shoulder pathology so that we can learn how to help these people better. So settle in and enjoy the podcast. Hey, welcome to Glenohumeral Gurus, but this time it's me in the hot seat. And after our recent podcast with Edel Fanning, she had questions she wanted to ask me. So I'm now the person in the hot seat, and I'm going to hand over to my interviewer. And my turn now is to be the interviewee. So welcome, Edel. Thanks for joining us. I'm a bit nervous about being this side of the fence.
And I was saying, I'm nervous being on this side of the fence. And I was like, ooh, which job is easier? And thank you so much for having me back. I really enjoyed the last podcast. And I was saying to you before this, I really enjoyed all of your podcasts. I think there's been some really nice content covered. And the really interesting thing is, what I'm picking up is there's certainly differences across continents. And that's what I really wanted to probably delve further into, a few little points that I have picked up across your previous podcasts, and how that might differ from, well, not necessarily differ, but maybe a slightly alternate approach and to maybe what I'm doing and how I can learn. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on again and giving me the
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I think sometimes the context of the healthcare system that each of us operate in sometimes dictate that, don't they? Like when we spoke last time about the type of work you're doing, and I reflected back on the type of work I'm doing, because currently my role as a specialist physio is to review difficult patients every day in clinic and try to see if there is a different non-operative management for them. So I don't get to do so much rehab stuff anymore particularly, but I get to review complicated patients. So it's challenging, but challenging in different ways, I think. So
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really, really valid point. I think that absolutely reflects how we manage our patients and the cultural differences as well. I think there's so many aspects which we might be able to touch on as we go through.
Yes,
Do you
go.
know what? Before we sorry, I was saying before we even go into the clinical side of things, one of my big questions, which I'm thinking lots of us out there are probably wondering, you've had such an impact on the shoulder world, and all your amazing research in recent years. Would you like to share some insights on how you honed your craft and how you got to be a specialist physiotherapist, and anything you would recommend for any other physiotherapist trying to pursue a similar pathway?
Such an interesting point of reflection for me, I guess, isn't it? Because I probably never planned to be here. I have simply followed the things in physio that have excited me. Do you know? And I guess when I think back to how the shoulder thing started, I was working in the UK for British Canoeing, and we had an athlete who had a shoulder dislocation on the run up into an Olympic Games, and I obviously then just wanted to do everything I could to help her. And so then I began to realize how much we didn't know about that. And I am, turns out, by nature quite curious. I came back to New Zealand and wanted to delve into the research, and it just spins my wheels, Edel. Do you know when you find your thing? So I don't know if that's good advice for people. I think the nature of my then physio career has been to work alongside amazing people who have really, I've just learned so much from them. And that has probably how I've honed my craft, to use your phrase. I think that I then learned from these people and then read the research and then tried to apply it and practiced in the clinic with my patients. And some things work and some things don't work. And then by nature, I'm a little bit skeptical. I have very strong clinical reasoning skills. And so that has sort of perpetuated me to where I am. I was really curious about how we could. I felt like we weren't doing enough in our space for non-operative management of shoulder instability, and I just am so excited by that space. There's so much work to do in that space that yeah, so I would say that's how it's happened. It's been quite organic for me. It hasn't been that sort of deliberate. I've just sort of followed my nose and done what I'm interested in, and here I am, and that's how it's been.
No, and I think that's really kind of fascinating, your journey, isn't it? So you're
Mm,
probably the big key things when I get what follow your passion. And I
yeah,
agree with you on the next one, absolutely. Surround yourself with amazing people to learn from.
yeah.
Which can be difficult sometimes, I think, for maybe some of the practitioners that are listening and they're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm in the right environment. But then the lovely
Mm,
thing about today's world is all of this further connections like these podcasts, access to lots of online content, all of that kind of
yeah.
thing now, which hopefully opens up. And even the other big thing is the networking, I think, isn't it? At the conferences, if you've got a real
Yes.
interest, suddenly start
Yes.
networking. You're only a conversation away from somebody else, isn't it? You
Yes.
kind of, I always think don't be afraid or feel intimidated because,
Not at
I
all.
think, yeah, most people are often open. And the other big thing you said, stay curious, isn't it?
I think
Um,
so.
and what about resources? Was there any kind of resources that you accessed or you could advise or along the way over the years that you felt really helped?
Yeah. Look, I think for me, probably a big step was doing my PhD. Like I had done my master's and I enjoyed that research process, but learning how to research, I had again a fabulous PhD supervisory team. And so they really helped clarify some of my thinking around the processes around that, so that I was again just able to discern, really, you didn't do this, can you really say that kind of like trying to, yeah, really just stay with that curiosity, but also that making sure that you are making the correct assumptions from the data that is presented, because I see that clinicians do that a lot because, oh, well, you've done this, therefore that. But in the research space, that takes so many steps, doesn't it? So, yeah, I don't know so much around resources. Again, it seems to be on challenging yourself to think in a different way. Like I deliberately choose to spend time with people that I disagree with because that might and I think that's a challenge, isn't it? We know from all this stuff on social media that you tend to and humans tend to congregate in people who think the same. But if you think like me, I don't learn from you because we already think the same. Who could I learn from that thinks differently than me? So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great advice. Yeah. And you're right. That's probably something we may not be internally aware of that. So I think that's really good advice. Don't be afraid to be challenged, isn't it? Because we're always continuing learning, and the more it
Yeah.
evolves, sometimes I think the less we or I certainly know sometimes. So
I think so. I think so. And also
yeah,
to have a really firm understanding that when you challenge what I think, you're not challenging me as a person. You're just, because me as a person, I'm fine. I'm on the ground. Do you know what I mean? But you just, oh, well, yeah, maybe. Oh, I could have thought about it like that. Maybe that would help me learn further. So,
yeah. No, do you know what? That is so true, and that really rings home. I remember the first time I submitted a paper in the PhD, and I got so much negative feedback on the first draft of it. Like I was almost internally taken. My supervisor is like, Edel, you got to
Yeah.
remember, it's not a criticism of you. It's a
No.
criticism of a piece of work, and it
Yes.
separates those things. And I think that is key and critical. And actually, that really leads me nicely into the next question of how you avoid burnout in this
Yeah.
profession. Even simple things like that, where we're challenged or we're given certain feedback in the research world, but also, and I think probably something a lot of us go through, and particularly when you get to say your kind of stage where you're seeing a lot of complex cases and the
Mhm.
expectations are incredibly high.
Yeah.
And I think certainly as physiotherapists, we're just so vocational, aren't we? We want
Yes.
to help just
Yes.
innately,
Yes.
um, maybe take some of that on.
Yes.
Yeah, how do you avoid burnout?
So I think I mean, it's a challenge, isn't it? And it's good to discuss this with you because it's very real. I see it happen in younger clinicians, and for me, it's like I've been doing this maybe 20, 25 years, and last year was just like, oh my God, can I keep maintaining this pace? So now I have some new strategies. I've been thinking about this a little bit over the last, well, I've been working on this to manage it differently over the last few months. But historically, I would, those complex patients, have worked with a wonderful therapist here in New Zealand, Lisa Hanson, who told me to wash my hands, wash all up to your elbows after, like do a proper washing after a really complex patient. But I'm rubbish at that. Sometimes I just get water all over my top, and so then I'm like really messy. So the washing my hands hasn't really worked for me, but it might work for others. I mentally have tried. I put on like a plastic poncho, and so that washes off me. So I can engage with people, but I don't necessarily take their emotion with me because I have on my imaginary poncho. So the imaginary poncho is good. I also work, and how I previously was managing this is I would then get on my bike and bike home so that I both could burn off some energy, but also let all that stuff get blown off me so that by the time I get home, I'm really present for my family, so that I try to keep those boundaries separate, I think. And I'm still working on keeping my boundaries, like it's a ongoing challenge for me. And I also think maintaining that separateness, and also this is the stuff I'm working on now, is trying not to take responsibility for things that aren't mine, because in that complex uh, patient population that I see, nearly all of them have had terrible journeys through healthcare. And that's not my responsibility. So I can feel empathy for them, but I shouldn't take responsibility for that. My responsibility is to make sure that the care that I deliver for my patient is world class. And that's the bit I can own, So take responsibility for what's yours and don't take responsibility for what's not yours. And also the other thing I'm recently learning is control the controllables, the things that are outside of your control. You can't worry about. Don't spend your energy there. You can only spend your energy on the things that you actually have some control over. So that's my.
I think there's some really, really good advice in there. And I think it's so important. It's probably something that's not taught in universities.
No.
I don't know if it even needs to be brought in only because the dropout rate, and I think it's pretty across.
Yeah, it's the same
A
here in New
continent,
Zealand.
isn't it, in terms of, yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of it is the one-on-one nature of our job, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it's often patient contact and often one-on-one.
Yes, and people
And it's
bring their
certainly
emotional energy, and they are looking for support.
they
And
are.
and that's great. Like great therapists create connection, they create therapeutic alliance, but there has to be some self-care because
Yeah.
otherwise it's not sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, then you can't keep helping people. So you have to make it work for you. That would be my advice. And that's
Absolutely.
around boundaries and around self-care and around empathy, but not overly responsible. It's all those things that are really crucial, because it's a tough job. It's a super tough job, the work we do. And I don't think people necessarily appreciate the level of emotional investment that takes from people, so cut yourself some slack. It's tough. It's hard.
Yeah,
I think it's a
and I
really
think
hard
often
job.
even just the realization we're all going through it, no matter
Yeah,
what level you're at, hey, where I'm like you,
yeah,
nearly 20 years qualified, I still go through it.
yeah,
And like that, I was thinking even some of the things that I've started to change, and I like that cloak. I even do that with the kids, I go home in the evening
yes,
and they're screaming.
yes,
I put on a like the Sonic the Hedgehog, a barrier, let it bounce off me just to help me
yes,
regulate myself. But which is always really nice. And the other thing I've started doing, in discussions and at the end of the discussions is like, a joint management, very much saying, you know, uh, you've got control over this. Hey, I'm the
yeah,
coach to help you guide through this, but
yes,
ultimately nobody's going to change this other than you. You know that the
yes,
responsibility isn't on me.
not at all.
And I think that's very much that's set in the early stages, and it
Yeah,
isn't this passive reliance on us, and
yes,
that they very much see what our role is,
mm,
and those kind of boundaries are set quite clearly, and a lot of that just
and
getting confident how you
yes,
challenge it and getting those
yes,
challenging conversations, and that they're very happy with the management plan before we proceed, and they've full control over all of that.
yes.
And
I think
hey,
that model around shared decision making has really helped me. I did a podcast with Tammy Hoffman. She was amazing, and it really helps to I'm not responsible for this. My role in this is to
absolutely.
make sure you have enough information to make your
Mhm.
choice, so that you are making
Mhm.
educated healthcare decisions for you. It might not be the decision that I would make for you. That's okay. This is not my life. This is your journey.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I think that is key, and that is really how myself in terms of it isn't my job to get you better. It's your job. My job,
yeah.
as you said, trying to provide a non-biased as much as possible. We all have our
Mhm.
biases
Of course.
and weaknesses, and of course, and all of those. Yeah, and then as you said, the other thing is having your outlets and sometimes it may become like, I've recently made a change, and partly because of that, because the patient volume was so incredibly high. I was like, I
Mm,
don't know if I can do this, for another, touch wood, if I stay healthy, another odd, 20, 30 years.
yeah.
It's a long old time. So sometimes I think sometimes you have to make those changes in your career to get a better balance and all of those
Yeah.
and
And I've
be no.
spoke lots to orthopedic surgeons about this, because the role is so similar. The role I do now is non-operative care, where they are operative care. That's what they do. And so I've spoken to some of them about how they manage this. And a lot of that is working in blocks. So previously I would work 10 or 12 weeks and then take a 2-week break, just so I could recharge and then go again. And that's typically how I see the orthopedic surgeons manage that, with conferences that they go to, so they are no patient contact, and then they can come in, do a block of work, then take a break so you can recharge. I think recently I've been trying to find a different way that's a bit more sustainable, because I shouldn't have to take 2 weeks away from my job so that I can keep doing it. So yeah, I've been working on some
Yeah.
different things, but that's
I,
how I see
I think
orthopedic surgeons manage it.
yeah, I think all of those are some really good strategies, and I think it's probably just making sure we're all having the conversations around
Yeah,
how I'm sure we're not obviously the only healthcare profession but often we are, fortunately or unfortunately, one that have to coordinate a lot of care, or we
yeah,
have time than other professions sometimes. In some cases, other, as you said, it is completely dependent on different healthcare systems in different parts of the world.
mm,
And some don't have time. And again, I can imagine that can be very stressful too.
yeah.
And no, thank
So
you for sharing all of that.
yeah,
Um,
no, I think it's important. I think you raise a really important point, and it's very
yeah.
real. Do you know, like
And the
everybody
other thing is
goes through
something
that.
I have had to think about
Yeah,
recently. gosh, how am I going to, but like you, I love it the majority of the time. And but there are certainly times that I'm like, what am I doing? This is
Yeah.
tough.
I think the
Um,
other thing, just while I'm in a position to help people and give advice, is I believe that you're here once, eh? This is your life. And I get to make this enormous contribution to help people as part of my life. But there's also so much of my life that I really enjoy outside of work. And so having in New Zealand, the work-life balance, that's a real thing. And I get that
mm,
that's different in other cultures, but having the work is part of your life, eh? It's not all your life.
And
So
I think the next generation coming up are better than that. I can already see
yeah,
it, how they value, and certainly when I was training, I would have stayed late all the time to see the people I wanted to see, how I observed, as you say, hang around the people I
yeah,
wanted to hang around, and purely because of a passion. But I do think there's a shift in the generation. And the other thing probably is that financial stability, that's probably the other thing, when it comes to that, is that it's financially rewardable while not burning you out. It's not that you're having
yeah,
to see X amount of patients. It's all of these kind of concepts, isn't it?
yeah,
And right
yeah,
balance with all of that's okay to talk about, I think.
yeah,
Um, and as you said, it gets, I think the longer you practice, the more some of these concepts you get more comfortable talking about or having to talk about because
yeah.
you might be experiencing it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this session. Edel and I talked so much about the role of physio and burnout that I've split these podcasts into two sessions. So this first one was about the toll that being a physiotherapist takes on you and how you could help to manage that better. Stay tuned for the second podcast that talks in detail about my management of shoulder instability. See you on the other side. Thanks for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've really enjoyed this content. You found some clinically useful tidbits, and some of the content has been thought-provoking. Don't forget you can follow me on my social media for some more up-to-date content. If you're looking for a shoulder brace, you can check that out via our shoulder braces on flawlessmotion.com. And if you wanted an online shoulder course, then I have a range of shoulder courses, through from an introductory shoulder course through to return to sport and a shoulder instability course. You can access these courses on margieolds.com or flawlessmotion.com. That's flawlessmotion.com. And every course comes with a complimentary question and answer session so we can drill into your understanding of the key concepts of the course. You can also join our Facebook group, Glenohumeral Gurus, and follow along for the conversations and discussions on this page. And otherwise, I look forward to you joining us for the next podcast. Thanks for your time. Until then, stay well, take care.